Salutations, dear viewers. This is George from Ireland, and here I am with another video about gun control, but mainly this one's responding to one of my interlocutors, Guy Fawkes. Thank you for commenting on my video. You prove my point so well. So Mr. Fawkes was saying, damn right it makes me feel masculine having a gun, and it appears to me that he suffers from a crushing sense of inadequacy. And as he is so manly, why does he hide behind what is presumably a pseudonym? I'm an ordinary man. I'm not macho. I'm not effeminate. Wouldn't be anything wrong with being either side of average in that regard. But I think that this gentleman and some like him, those of his ilk should realise that having a gun doesn't make you a man, or having more guns is not like having more testicles or something. Women can have guns too, and indeed most men don't have guns. Some extraordinarily macho men don't have them at all. So people who have some sort of inferiority complex sometimes try to overcompensate by doing things like that. So if this is your hobby, having guns, I'm not against that, but I believe that governments should restrict them. And you think I'm wrong, and we should have them in Ireland. We're missing out. We should meet. You should come to Ireland sometime, or Great Britain. I'm there more often, and we could go around, make a fascinating video. You're persuading people how we're missing out, how we'd have fewer deaths if everybody could carry automatic weapons. See if you can win people over. Somehow, I suspect you wouldn't make much headway. Anyway, this gentleman showed himself to be an anti-Muslim bigot by the things he was saying. Seemed rather un-Christian to me. I would guess he is a Christian, as a high majority of Americans identify as Christians. Now, being Christian is just as good as being a Muslim. Obviously, they're bad people of all faiths. Why does anyone believe in a faith? Usually because they're brought up in it. If you'd been brought up as a Muslim, almost certainly you'd believe in that, even if you're just a nominal member of it. Same as if you've been brought up as a Hindu family. They're people of all personality types who subscribe to every religion. It really doesn't predict someone's behaviour or their morality. We had a problem in Ireland with a terrorist conflict till about 20 years ago, and there were Christian terrorists of the two major denominations, Catholic and Protestant. There was a national identity issue as well, and that conflict was fuelled largely by illegal weapons imported from the United States. US government thankfully helped us stop that. But the terrorists, they then gave up their guns and they were destroyed, and the conflict stopped and violence has dropped dramatically. So it just shows you what effective gun control can do. And obviously the law enforcement wasn't working well enough at the time. So yes, Christians definitely can be terrorists. Now, many clergymen spoke out against this conflict and this criminality, but there were clergymen of both denominations who egged on these terrorists to commit their terrible crimes. You know, terrorism can be a Christian thing too. Look at Timothy McVeigh, not a lone wolf, he had a network. There's been Christian terrorism in the United States. You know, when a Christian, especially a white one, goes on a mass shooting, the whole Christian world isn't held responsible. Christendom isn't required to repudiate this, or a white does it, and it's usually a white Christian. The white community is not told how to take a long, hard look at itself. So stop this anti-Muslim prejudice. We shouldn't be unfair to them. Anyway, Guy Fawkes, you know where your name comes from. He tried to blow up Parliament in 1605. Was he a terrorist? There were no gun controls back then, and yet still the Catholic minority in England was persecuted. So shows you that an armed population doesn't prevent people being legally discriminated against. If you're a Christian, you may well like the King James Bible. Did you know that Guy Fawkes, your namesake, he was trying to kill that King James who authorised that new translation of the good book? So anyway, you should get some Muslim friends, and maybe you're a lot happier. Muslims are welcome to pray in my house. I don't believe in their creed, but that's no harm. I would far rather to share my house with a Muslim than a gun nut. And indeed, I've shared houses with Muslims before. Anyway, so you called me an elitist. Well, you've got no idea about my wealth. Look at Trump. He's a billionaire, and he says he's against gun control. So there are plenty of wealthy people on that side, as indeed there are working class people on the gun control side. Now, I realise these things are absolutes. There are obviously various gradations on both caucuses, and neither side is a monolith. Look at Wayne LaPierre, president of the NRA. He wants some gun control. Is he a traitor to the cause? Do you want no gun control whatsoever? Do you want to repeal the existing gun control going back to the 30s? The federal law preventing most people carrying a firearm within 1,000 feet of a school? No gun control, no control of lethal weapons? Would you let a 5-year-old who is insane control a nuclear bomb? And I don't just mean Trump, because if you wouldn't let that child control a bomb, then that is some control of arms. It's not just guns, it's arms generally. People have made this point to me. How about cars? Car crashes kill people. I'll take your analogy. Cars are not created to kill, they're created for transport. But cars are a lot more regulated than guns. You have to have a minimum age. You have to pass a test. The car has to be in a roadworthy condition. There's certain rules of the road. You can't drink drive. Also, there's a speed limit. And if all this is observed by all the drivers, then the chance of a crash are virtually nil. I mean, unless a pedestrian does something, there are rules about what pedestrians can do on roads, or unless it's terrible weather conditions, in which case you shouldn't drive. So if they're driving safely, it's virtually impossible to happen. So we could impose similar style rules for guns. Say you have to pass a certain test to be allowed a gun license, or reach a certain age and so forth. So some of the anti-gun control people say they're patriots, and indeed they can be patriots if they love their country and they're doing something for it, trying to stop their compatriots getting killed. Now, I'm not a very patriotic person. I do feel sentimental about patriotic music or certain videos or certain moments. But in my more rational times, I'm able to look at the world more objectively and say Switzerland in some ways is a fantastic country, better to live in mine. Denmark is perhaps the most civilized country in the world, or Italy's got such a marvelous lifestyle. So I think this emotion clouds reason, and I try to keep that in its place. I don't start from the foolish presupposition that everything about my country is the best, and our way is the best way, indeed the only way. Anyway, someone was saying you're stereotyping gun owners. Well, the term gun nut, one of your number used it, so they're soi-disant gun nuts. And in our little contretemps, your colleague, I could call him, he was expressing his views, and clearly certain attitudes coalesce. They're mostly supportive of the Republican Party, and I know that, again, there's a diversity of opinion within that party, but quite often people in the party are Christian fundamentalists, are anti-Muslims, are militarists, are hyper-capitalists. These attitudes coalesce. Now, no one doesn't have to subscribe to all these viewpoints in order to be on that side, but there seems to be some sort of connection. You might be a Republican every other way, but not on this issue. Or you might be a Democrat or something else and actually be against gun control as it is. So I'm not against Republicans or conservatives per se, especially if they're for gun control. We try not to make it a left-right debate, make it too partisan. Try to reach out to everybody who could potentially agree. But you might see that there's a certain thread of irrationality and prejudice running through that side. Here are some of the comments I've got. Gun rights are not rights. That's a literal quotation. Gun deaths do not have a lot to do with guns. I couldn't make it up. It's difficult to begin to persuade someone who's devoid of all common sense. You are a gun hater. I don't hate guns. I used to own one. I've used them a little bit, but I just think they should be controlled because they are created to be deadly. So reasonable legislation on them. And somebody pointed out the United States is only the 11th highest in the list of gun deaths per capita. Only the 11th? Are you wanting to be top or something? Wouldn't you prefer to be lower down the list? So we can discuss this in relation to alcohol some other day. There's no reason you couldn't restrict alcohol as well as restricting guns. The United States did have prohibition, as you know. Nobody's calling for that cataclysm to return. There are important differences. Every time someone takes a sip of alcohol, that's a choice. Someone doesn't choose to get shot, generally. A child in school is not choosing to get shot or run the risk. So it's about voluntary dangers. Someone killed in an accident by gun is usually not choosing that. People who are suddenly depressed and want to kill themselves, we don't consider that a choice because they are mentally ill. So it's not comparable to alcohol. Alcohol in moderation can be good for you. Red wine's good for the heart. Beer is nutrition. That is liquid bread. A bullet is never good for you. Those who die of alcoholism might enjoy it. Nobody I know has ever said being shot is fun. So again, it's a completely bogus comparison. But even taking your analogy, the case for gun control is unanswerable. And do you want to repeal the existing gun legislation or not? And if you don't, then you do accept some gun control. So we're all along the same scale of gun control, it would seem. I look forward to your comments.